You mentioned the Premiership standards a lot on this podcast, Christian, the stats in which, especially the last 10 premiers have excelled, with some being more crucial than others. There are 5 stats for which all of the last 10 premiers were ranked inside the top 6. Maybe just a bit of a refresher on what those are before we get into which teams are doing them well.
Yep, so stacks up very much with defence. So 10 out of 10 premiers have ranked top 6 in points against in the last 10 years.
So restricting your opposition's points?
Yep, just overall points, and top 6 in points against from turnover. So if you look at the 2 main score sources, 10 of the 10 have been in the bottom 6 for points conceded from turnover, or top 6 from points conceded from turnover. Only 7 of the 10 have been there for points conceded from stoppages. So you can clearly see having your turnover game in order has stacked up a bit more importantly than your stoppage game. Opposition points from forward half. So that's how many points your opposition scores from chain starting in their forward half. So how many times you've either lost a clearance in your defensive half or turned it over in your defensive half. You need to keep them to a minimum.
Yep.
The teams that have ranked in the top 6 for that stat have all, last 10 premiers have all ranked in the top 6 for that stat. And then the offense stuff is you being able to move the ball from your D50 to inside 50. So just being able to be the top 6 in moving the ball from one end to the other and dominating territory, which is on a little bit of a watch this year. So last 10 of the premiers have all ranked in the top 6 for inside 50 differential. We know the game's probably moving a little bit more transition-y than territory. So that's one to watch, but it still stacks up for the previous 10 premiers. So yeah, it's pretty simple. You want to be able to defend really well, move the ball from one half to the other.
Simple game footy.
Better than everyone else, and you want to try to keep it in your forward half as much as possible.
So I guess we've got about a month for most teams at least under our belts now where we can sort of look at the form and see what's starting to take shape with each team. So it's a good time to take stock. Are there teams that are nailing these that are surprising, or is it the teams that are at the top of the ladder? Where do we want to start?
Yeah, probably it does sort of line up quite well with the ladder, but it just gives you sort of a little bit of further insight into where teams might be more vulnerable going forward, or might have a strength to come up if there are in the lower part of the ladder. So to start with, we talk about points against being more important, but obviously points for is something that's tracked on this as well. So there's only 3 clubs at the moment that are ranked in the top, and everything we do is top 6. Yep. So top 6 is sort of what you're aiming to reach. 3 clubs that rank top 6 for both points for and points against this year. So top 6 for scoring well and restricting the opposition. That's Geelong, who are 4th and 4th. GWS, who are 5th for points for, 1st for points against, and Gold Coast, who are 2nd for points for and 3rd for points against.
So they're probably the best pick if you were trying to balance it out. I guess the Giants are great at restricting opposition scores, but the Suns have a better balance between offense and defense.
Yeah, being 2nd and 3rd. So just drilling down in between those 3 teams and sort of dropping down. So you look at probably the contested possession differential is the biggest one. So Gold Coast number 1 for winning contested possessions, Geelong 5th, GWS 15th. And ground ball get differential sort of similar. Gold Coast 4th, Geelong 7th, so just sitting outside the top 6, and GWS 13th. So if you look at GWS, yes, they're scoring well and defending well, but at the moment, if you can get it into a contested game, so if we think wet weather footy's coming later in the year and the more contests you can sort of force, that might show their vulnerability a little bit more.
Probably surprises me a bit about the Giants.
Yeah, the one that surprises me the most, so the contest stuff, they do quite well around the clearances. They're 4th for clearance differential. So a lot of the contest negative stuff is the stuff happening in general play. But you talk about the orange tsunami and the ball movement and how good it is to watch. Across the whole season so far, they're still only 13th for moving the ball from back 50 to forward 50. So when it works, it gets on the highlights and we love to watch it, but they're still not producing it as much as Gold Coast, who are 1st, and Geelong, who are 4th for taking the ball one end to the other. So just comparing those 3 teams who both have a very good scoring profile, you can see that GWS have a few more issues if you look at the underlying, contested possession and ball movement from end to end. Even their inside 50 differential is 13th, so the ball's not living in their forward half. So just a few issues there for GWS. We speak about Adelaide, and we spoke about how good that game was against Gold Coast on the weekend. Adelaide 1st for points for, 2nd for scores per inside 50, most points from turnover, 2nd most points from stoppages.
So an offensive juggernaut.
Yeah, but 9th for points against, 8th for opposition scores per inside 50, 9th for points against from turnover, and 14th for points against from stoppages, which we say isn't usually, 14th points from stoppages, not horrible.
Look, but they're not well off the pace.
Yeah.
I mean, 9th, 8th, these kind of
But
areas.
we do know that those areas are, as you sort of said off the top, they're sort of more important in terms of what you need to be able to do. So how do they take a little away from the offensive side to put it
That's
into...
that's the question for me. That's the watch with Adelaide.
Yeah.
You see that they're 9th for points against, which is smack bang in the middle. You hope that only goes up from here. If that goes south from here, goes to 10th, 11th, then I'm almost writing them off from winning the Premiership this year. If they can sort of tighten up that points against number in their defence, that's going to allow them to get further.
A couple of teams that are closer to the top of the ladder you haven't mentioned. So Brisbane's one, and then Hawthorn's another. Are they thereabouts for some of these stats?
Yeah, so Brisbane's an interesting one. They're so 6th for points for, so enough scoring, but 15th for score per inside 50. So still haven't found that, people are going to say, they no longer have Joe Danaher and things like that, but they still haven't got that fully functioning front six going.
Well, it's been a bit of a changes here and there, Loman in and out, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, so a few injuries, and 7th for points against, 6th for oppo score per inside 50. So doing well down back. But we just take into account, I spoke about this stat before, just looking at if you start a chain, how often that turns into a score. So you can start a chain from kick in, clearance or intercept. So collating all those chains together and saying how well do you score from those, Brisbane are actually 13th in that stat. So they're down with Carlton, Melbourne, North Melbourne, West Coast, the teams that we know that are really struggling to put the scores on the scoreboard. Brisbane need a lot of opportunities to get the points.
So I was going to say, they get the ball a lot.
They're getting a lot of clearances, good at contested possession differential.
So if teams are able to sort of restrict their ability to win the ball and have the ball and use the ball, they might not get as many chances at goal, and their scores might sort of falter as a result.
They're not going to go forward and score from five goals from 6 inside 50s or something. It's more been about the quantity for them rather than the quality so far this year for Brisbane.
How much has that dropped off, or in terms of that efficiency from last year?
Yeah, so last year they were, let's have a look, so they were number 1 for chain score percentage, and 2023 I'm sure they were top 3 as well, so they were 2nd in 23, best in 24 and 13th this year.
So this can't be all Joe Danaher.
No, that's what I'm saying, it's clearly not. This is looking at every chain, so that could be just, your chain could start in your defensive 50 and end in your defensive midfield, and that sort of gets across next to it. So it's not always on the forwards, it's on the whole team and how many opportunities you really need to put a score on the scoreboard.
So that's, given what we've seen from them over the past couple of years and the players they have, the lists they have, it tells me that's probably going to trend up as they play more games. I don't see why they would just go from here and all of a sudden drop to here and stay there for the whole year.
Yeah, and we've spoken about you can't peak for the whole year. So it's something that Brisbane know they can do. At the moment, they're 13th. They're still
look at Brisbane's
sitting.
Start last year.
Yeah.
At this time last year, they probably weren't nailing a lot of these metrics.
Yeah. I think it was the other way around. I think they were nailing a lot of the metrics and not getting a lot of
Fagan was lamenting. He's like, the numbers are good.
Yeah. So this is a little bit of, that's a worry, but it's something that we've been able to do in the past. They're still getting wins, and it's just a number they just need to improve. So,
what about the Hawks?
The Hawks are actually so interesting in terms of 7th for points for, 12th for points against. 12th for score per inside 50, and 5th for points against, 7th for oppo score per inside 50. So they're 5th for points against, but that's their only top 6 ranking when you look at the top line stats. But you look at some of the defensive stuff. So they're the 5th hardest team to score against from any chain. Conceded the 3rd fewest points against from turnovers, which we said was one of those 100% stats.
Sure, yeah.
Pressure, which is only a 30% stat, but they're 2nd on that, so they're working hard defensively. 15th, another one similar to GWS. We know if you talk about Hawthorn and when they're going at their best, it's their ball movement and they just seem unstoppable going from the width and length of the ground as much as they want. They're actually 15th this year from going D50 to forward 50. So
when it comes off, it works well.
Yeah, so there's a few issues in the numbers. I mean, the Carlton game, probably, Carlton was on top for 2.5 quarters. Hawthorn just sort of took their opportunities. Essendon game was a little bit similar, the contest. So Hawthorn are another one where they're going great. Their win-loss record is looking really well. But you look at the actual profile here, and you heard Sam Mitchell talk about it in his press conferences. There's still a lot of issues in their game that they need to fix up. But it's one of those positive signs for me where your game's not in complete, not in 100% order when you look at the spreadsheet here.
Yep.
But when you look at the results that you're getting, you're still on top of the ladder or close to the top. So St Kilda, just another one I'll quickly touch on. Sure. Number 1 for scoring per inside 50. They are 3rd for points for, 11th for points against, and 11th for oppo score per inside 50. So you look at Ross Lyon always being a defensive juggernaut. This year the offense has started unbelievably well, and the defense is the one that's got question marks on it.
So I wonder if that's almost like the reverse of what we're talking about with the Crows, where it's sort of like we because all off season it's like St Kilda needs to find a way to score more.
Yeah.
So, once again, it's a small sample size. But if they have unlocked more scoring, they've obviously taken away something from the defence. Yeah. But it's such a fine balance, isn't it? You don't want to go too far the other way.
Yeah, with St Kilda, it's probably where their zone set up. So they're setting up further up and trying to win a lot more of their forward half intercepts. Whereas last year their defence was getting protected because all the team was pushing back, and a lot of their intercepts and defence was in the defensive 50. Now they're trying to have a lot more defence presence in the midfield and attacking midfield, which got to help them on the scoreboard.
Those numbers are probably a little bit inflated as well. They have played the Crows, who were on top of their game offensively in that clash as well. So you might find after 6 to 8 weeks...
They've had a funny one because they've had the Adelaide game, which boosted their numbers down, but they've also had the Richmond game, which they smashed Richmond. So they sort of even themselves out across 2 games. But there's a few teams here where it's like 4 weeks in, it all depends on just who they've played at the moment.
Are there any teams that are currently not in amongst the top reaches of the ladder who we can be looking at with some sort of optimism, a la Brisbane last year, where the numbers are looking okay, and the stats are looking okay, but the ladder position isn't?
He's hopeful you're going to tell him Carlton's still alive.
Give me something.
Yeah, Carlton's got the defensive profile going all right. So they're the 4th hardest team to score against per inside 50, and they're number 1 for chain to score percentage against. So the Brisbane number I was saying is, Brisbane were 13th for turning their own chains into a score. Carlton's opposition, they're the hardest team to score against from any chain.
Yep.
But again, Carlton are just giving up too many turnovers, probably losing too many stoppages, so giving a lot more chain opportunities to begin with. But if you look at the hardest team to score against, it's Carlton. That's got to sort of stack up well for finals. But the one for me is, as I said, to get to finals, we talk about how, exactly, that's what I'm saying. When you look at it and you say, okay, defensively, who's got the best profile, blah, blah. Carlton's going to stack up there, but there's so many other holes in their game where it's 16th, 18th, 17th.
So if you had to look at one team outside the 8 right now, is there a team that you're looking at and going, you know what, they might be okay?
The Dogs, because I feel like the Dogs always stand
look well
up,
in
stack up
the...
pretty well.
The Dogs, 2nd for ball movement from end to end, which is one of the important stats. 3rd for oppo points from forward half, which is one of the important stats, so they don't get locked in their back half. But still just 10th for points against, 12th for points against from points from turnover differential. So still a few issues for me.
Do have a lot of players to come back in though.
Yeah, so I was going to say St Kilda, I think, are just in the 8, aren't they? They're the ones for me that probably have the profile that no one's talking about. But the more I look at this, the more it sort of stacks up with the ladder as it is at the moment.
What do you make of the Saints? I think there was a discussion about them sort of being in that lower half of the ladder. But what they have shown offensively and with the players that they do have in certain positions, and then the drive out of defence as well, the attacking part of the defence, it all seems to be working quite well. I know, a month into the season. Any thoughts on the Saints?
Yeah, I mean, they were in the pre-season AFL tiers that I did. They were sort of in the probably going to be irrelevant tier down the bottom end. I think most people would have felt that way at the start of the year. But as you say, it's small sample size, but credit to Ross and the coaching staff for obviously identifying what's been an issue for the last couple of seasons, and say it again, small sample size, but appears to have fixed it in some capacity.
Jack McRae, any thoughts on his acquisition?
He's been a great acquisition. I said at the start of the year, just kind of off the cuff comment before the year had started, there's worse bets to make than throwing $10 on Jack McRae to win the Brownlow medal. It's not like he's passed it by age. The opportunity sort of just left him at the Bulldogs. He's come in. He's proven that he's still a ball magnet. He's winning a lot of clearances. He's just added something else to their midfield, and he's still a good footballer. It's not like he doesn't know how to play football. So they've just got a few players going through there that are playing well.
Mitch Owens, Jack Higgins, that forward half is working at the moment.
Yeah, it is
all without Max King.
Oh, exactly, we've got an inclusion to come in. So just with Jack McRae, 9.5 score involvements per game, 2nd in the comp behind Toby Green. So Toby Green's involved in 10 chains per game, 10 scoring chains per game for the Giants, and Jack McRae's 2nd down the middle.
And I think that would surprise a lot of people. I think people probably don't see Jack McRae as that high score involvement player, more just sort of quick one touch through the midfield. But it's obviously, even if he's getting his hands on it first, they're getting it out to the outside, and that's when they're really damaging. So great start to the year. They couldn't have asked for a better start, the Saints, really. So
before we move on from the Premiership standards, the teams that are not good and those that are not nailing any of these.
Yeah, so Carlton, West Coast, Melbourne are the clear, obvious ones. So if you want to sort of talk about one that I've got huge concerns about is Port Adelaide. And mentioned them a little bit last week, but we'll go, look at the 100% stats. They're 13th for points against, 12th for points against from turnover. 16th for Oppo points from forward half. So again, turning the ball over behind centre and getting beaten that way. 9th for moving the ball from back 50 to forward 50. And 13th for inside 50 differential. So that ranking of 9th for moving the ball from one end to the other was their best ranking in those.
And this includes the game
stats.
against Richmond.
Yeah, so that's including the inflated numbers against Richmond. So a lot to worry about with Port Adelaide for me. And then the contest stuff, 16th for contested possession differential, 18th post clearance, 17th ground ball, 15th clearance differential, and 13th for pressure applied. So similar to what I sort of spoke about with GWS earlier, they're great at the clearances and then probably losing a few of those contests in general play. Port Adelaide are losing clearances, losing out in general play, not scoring as well. So that they're still working well in transition, but there's a lot of the part of their game where they just lose too many contests around the ground to really get anything going.